the whole, this is why I'm interested in Your Woman, change the whole way we look at Shylock, because we are inclined to think, for no good reason, I think in the play, we're inclined to think of Shylock as an old man. Not sure there might be the odd line that might intimate that. But
you'll see the difference twixt old Shylock and Bassanio.
Yeah, well, old Shylock.
Old Shylock.
When you play him as a young man, as this actor did, it changed everything. Because the lines that Shylock, he didn't put lines that weren't there. He acted the lines that were there, and suddenly they had an immense vigor. And what Shylock did was to run rings round those melancholy, tepid, weak, sad, hypocritical Venetians. He just won. And the effect of it, they didn't know how to handle him. He made jokes, he was quick, he was sharp, and it changed the whole pound of flesh thing, which we're inclined to think of as Shylock brewing up this nasty, this is what a Jew will do, he'll grab a pound of flesh. It doesn't seem to have any intention of doing that, the way this guy played it, or indeed in the play as I now read it. It comes to him, it builds. He says he'll take it on, he's enjoying the hypocrisy of these Venetians, and he grows, he warms to the part being, it's a tease as well. The pound of flesh is a tease. It's, I will take, you'll remember the lines, of course you will, from whichever part of your fair flesh it pleases
me.
Your fair flesh. He flirts. He flirts with these Venetians. It's a very intimate thing. And the way they did it in Venice was, as he said that, whichever part of your fair flesh, he stared into the pantaloons of the Venetian.
Note to self. Interestingly, all of that flirtation and that use of language, when you put it in the mouth of a woman, it absolutely invigorates the play and the scene, because when we read the play, and what I think is often missed when it's taught in schools, which is another big reason that Bridget and I want to do this production, is because we want the legacy of being able to talk about anti-Semitism, to be able to talk about this play, but also to do a very big teachers pack alongside it to help you understand the play and to understand the anti-Semitism, the history of when Shakespeare wrote it, what was going on for Jews in England, and what was going on in 1936, which is when we're setting it. But all that language that Shylock uses is so much more witty and urbane and flirtatious than the pompous Antonio, than Bassanio, who's sort of down on his luck. These aristocrats, these Venetian aristocrats are, excuse my language, arseholes. They really are.
Not only are they racist, they're feeble.
They're feeble.
They're exhausted. They all come on. The play begins with, I'm feeling so miserable. He says, I'm feeling so miserable. Somebody else comes on and says, I'm feeling so miserable too. Portia comes on and says, my little body. You just think, oh, to hell, a lot of it. You're also...
Well, they're bored. They're bored. They're so privileged. That's the problem with them.
Well, you've now turned it political. But if you like...
Well, you have to have,
for me, it is political. Because it's such a political action to do this play in this time, coming back to your question. And why is Shylock problematic? Because he is this enormous role in Shakespeare, in our great national poet. And so he appears to stand for something more than just this play. You know, we've got Portia, we've got Romeo, we've got Juliet, we've got Hamlet, we've got Lear, we've got all these other characters. Even Othello is noble. But the one character who stands front and center as a Jew is a very problematic character who is not always sympathetic and who is viciously abused in the course of the play. And at the end of his destruction, he's left with nothing and nothing to live on. And then we all go off to Belmont and have a really jolly time joking about whether we've given each other's whether our husbands have given rings to people that they shouldn't do. And it's you go into this sort of comic register. And for me, what's exciting about this project, and Tracy saying, oh, I'd be interested in doing this as a female character in 1936, is that you get to interrogate the problematic Portia and the problematic Antonio. You know, Portia, the last time I saw a production of this play was the RSC at in Stratford. It was Dervla Crotty, I think. And people kept saying how marvelous Portia is. They go on about it in the play. More or less, the second scene you see her in, she doesn't want to be touched by someone because of the color of his skin. and, you know, let all of his complexion choose me so. That's before she's even started on Shylock. So it's meaningless to do the play without paying attention to every line that's in it, or not necessarily every line, because we always cut, don't we? But you have to look at all the colours in the tapestry and try and interrogate them. Otherwise, it's very, very superficial. So this has been a fantastic journey, going through the play, looking at it from the perspective of a woman who's experienced misogyny as well as anti-Semitism, and Tracy has a fair bit of that in her backpack, and then through this 1936 context, because we wanted to confront our own fascism in this country. We like to pat ourselves on the back and say Britain stood alone, but some very influential people were fascist.
Well, maybe this is a good moment for me to ask where these ideas for your different versions of Merchant of Venice, both yours, Howard, and Merchant 1936, where these ideas came from. Do you want to go first?
I never wanted to do, it was never an ambition of mine to write a novel about Shylock. I didn't like the play at school. That had something to do with the fact that when we read it at school, the teacher said, Jacobson, you can be Shylock. And I didn't like the way he said that. I didn't like it. I didn't like, I was a bad actor and shy, and I didn't like reading. So I didn't enjoy the experience. I felt very uncomfortable about the play. There is, I believe, in every Jew, a little corner in every Jew of Jew hating or of Jew discomfort. I'll challenge you. We all have it. We all have it somewhere. The fashion for it now is, we call it Israel. Israel is the Jew we don't like. The Israeli is the Jew we don't like. Orthodox Jews is the part of Jewishness that the secular Jew doesn't like. And Shylock, this play about Shylock with those famous, really wonderful speeches that made me uncomfortable at the time about hasn't a Jew eyes and so on, was the part of the Jew I didn't like. I didn't want to hear it. And I taught Shakespeare for years at university, but I never taught The Merchant of Venice. I didn't want to go near all that. It felt too much of an issue. And then I was asked if I would do, I can't even remember the name. What was the name of it? No, the publisher asked me, they were doing a series of contemporary writers doing contemporary plays. Would I like to do one? I said, yes, I'd love to do Hamlet.
Hamlet.
And they said, yeah, well, that's a nice idea, Howard. Anybody else? Macbeth. I went through my heroes. Coriolanus, I'd love to do Coriolanus. It's just silent on the other end of the phone. And then I heard, have you ever thought of doing that? And I knew what was coming. And I said, well, let me reread it. And I reread it, and I thought, this is tremendously exciting, because as I read it, it is not an anti-Semitic play, which is not to say that there is not anti-Semitism in it. Since there is anti-Semitism in us, why shouldn't there be a bit in Shakespeare? But Shakespeare is Shakespeare. Shakespeare, for me, is the beginning and the end of literature, the beginning and the end of art, and the beginning and the end of thought. And he is not going to be, such a great mind is not going to be a miserable little racist. We see that in Othello, and I believe we see that in this play. We've already been talking about how ghastly these other people are. He is head and shoulders of everybody else in the play. We think he's not nice. Hamlet is a much more unpleasant character than Shylock. We talked about Shylock not having nobility. I think Shylock does have nobility. I find Shylock, we can talk about that in detail later, I find him very, very touching. But beyond that, I find him impressive, I find him witty, I find him right. I'm likely to find him right, or am I not? But I do find him right and convincing. I think it's a fantastic challenge that he throws out. And it's an interesting, I don't know whether you're doing anything with this, but the pound of flesh. When I did a television program about it, and I was talking to one of the great Shakespeare scholars, James Shapiro, who's terrific about Jews in Shakespeare. And I said, I've just had this idea. James, do you think I'm mad? I've just had this idea. The pound of flesh grows out of the circumcision fear. Remember that for hundreds of years, the non-Jewish world did not understand what circumcision was. They thought it turned men into women. They thought that then men bled for the rest of their life, menstruated, Jewish men menstruated for the rest of their lives, and that was why they needed the blood of non-Jews to replace the blood that was spilt because of this strange thing that they did. And I said, don't you think this is some kind, in some way, whether he knows it or not, Shakespeare is echoing this, the anxiety of the Gentile world about that pound of flesh. And he laughed in my face. He said, oh, you think you've made a discovery? Of course it is. And the idea that all this is at play in Shakespeare, who won't have made a study of all this, but he had a wonderful ear, he would have picked this up, he would have been attentive. And I think we should, the idea of people going to this play and saying, oh God, there's a Jew here and he's not always very nice, and we all get upset, is mad. That's not how drama works. We should welcome, we should, instead of saying, let's read it a different way, by all means, let's read it. Let's look at how you do it. But I want to welcome Shylock back. Shylock is a good Jew, and I want him back. We should all be such a good Jew as Shylock. He does a couple of things that aren't so nice.
You see, okay, so we've had this conversation before. I think that the play is an anti-Semitic play, but I think it's written by a brilliant writer. And I don't think you can help but take the politics out of everything. If you look at the time that it was written during the Armada. There was an enormous amount of anti-Semitism. Jews, I think, had been banished or imprisoned. The Queen had that doctor, didn't she, Lopez, who she didn't want to kill, and she didn't want to make an example of, but she had to put him in the Tower. After years of fighting his case, he was then bought out, hung, drawn, quartered, castrated in the most terrible way. And the idea of baiting Jews, jeering at Jews, was the political atmosphere that he wrote that play. The Jew of Malta is a slightly more honest play, I think, because it's openly anti-Semitic. It's cartoon-like in its character of Barabbas. But because Shakespeare is such a good writer, he can't help but write such a three-dimensional character in Shylock. But whichever way you look at it, the legacy that Shylock has passed down of the ages is to add to they murder Jewish children, blood libels, and then my ducats, my daughter. My money means more to me than my own flesh and blood. And so that's just another trope that has gone on. So I think it is a very political piece of writing.
Legacy is a tricky word, because legacy is to do with the way we read a thing. And if for one reason or another we've chosen to read a play in one way, over the centuries, that doesn't mean that's what the play is. It is possible to say you've got the play wrong. You've got the play wrong because you needed to get the play
It's
wrong.
also, but the play is the play which exists in the beginning and the end of everything, as you say. The production is in the here and now. So the decisions that you make in the production are the decisions that are political. So whether something it comes across as anti-Semitic or not. I mean, I think I'm probably a bit more with Howard on this. I'm not sure it's an anti-Semitic play. And actually, you're right, there is great nobility in the character. I don't see that Shakespeare, you could say it's an anti-Semitic play if you read The Speech Hath Not a Jew Eyes, which should stop anybody in their tracks.
I'm a bit worried if you think Tracy is now making this play that you're directing. I wonder if you ought to drop Tracy. And I'm prepared to take over.
Such a bad son. So I think that the legacy then is anti-Semitic. But my idea of this was I went to see an all-female Julius Caesar, and it unlocked something for me about that play, and I loved it. I really loved it. And I've been thinking for a long time, what would happen to the Merchant of Venice if you had a female Shylock with her daughter, a single mother with her daughter? What does that unlock in the play? And she's very dominating of that daughter, and she's living in a world where there is an enormous amount of anti-Semitism. In my own experience of standing up to anti-Semitism, there is a huge interlock of misogyny and anti-Semitism. So her becoming a woman in a non-Jewish world, fighting her corner, unlocked for me a whole load of stuff. And I also thought of my great-grandma, my Bubba Annie, and my great auntie, Machine Gun Molly, and another one of my great aunties called Sarah Portugal, who had a slash of red lipstick and smoked a pipe. These were strong East End matriarchs who had come out of Belarus, who had known what, poverty and survival meant. It meant slapping a cow across your shoulders, dragging it across the field, being able to barter with your non-Jewish neighbors, turning your hovel into a palace come Shabbat. You were the brains behind the operation, and the idea of most Jewish men, the ideal was if you you had money, you would become a Talmudic scholar. So these strong, tough Jewish matriarchs came over to England. My Bubba came over at 15. The pogroms were happening in 1905 to 1907. She nearly saw her father beheaded. I think she herself was nearly raped. She was sent over at 15. She got on a boat and she came over to England and she worked in Auntie Yetta's factory. And she slept on the floor until my great-grandfather Isaac, who'd met her on the boat, tracked her down and said, I said I was going to marry you, let's go. And they went and lived in Cable Street, but she was left a widow. And these women were strong. And the women that I grew up with in my life, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my Bubba, all my great aunties, these women were tough as nails. They knew how to negotiate a contract. They knew how to stand up for themselves. The British middle classes and aristocracy found it an absolute anathema. You know, it was absolutely not what women were meant to be, decorative, quiet, to know their place, to look nice. But these women were tough. And I think it's the same story for all immigrant families that come from strong matriarch backgrounds. So when you put that woman in the role of Shylock, money lending under the counter, running her business in Cable Street, lending to these feckless aristocratic boys who come in, whose trust funds have run out, and they need to earn a bit of extra to pay for the prostitutes, to pay for the gambling, to pay for this. You've got this tough matriarch who comes across Antonio, who is their kind of leader. And then you put it in 1936, which is where Bridget came into it, where we started to talk about this, and set it against a world of Oswald Mosley's fascism and aristocratic fascism. And you've got a really interesting backdrop for this play.
It's fascinating. Can I just say that's fantastic? Just one thing. I went out with all those women.
Thanks.
Well, all of them.
Some of them, well, there's one or two I don't recognise. But Machine Gun, what she called, who lived in Manchester in the late 50s, I can tell you more about her. But what you're saying, you're not saying, are you, that this cuts against what the Shakespeare play?
No,
I think Shakespeare would have loved it.
He would have loved this production. I hope he comes back.
And the reason we know he would have loved it is because there's a touch of that already in the male Shylock.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Good.
And what is so brilliant about it is that female actors often get to play very, very nice people a lot of the time, and very, very simple, on the nose. I used to get so bored with all those David Hare plays and the saintly women. And so Tracy will be completely fearless in this role. She won't be playing for sympathy, you know?
That's what they used to do.
Yes.
And so we got excited. We met each other at one of those kind of, you know, networking-y, drinksy things after the Tonic Theatre Awards a few years ago. How many years? 4, 5?
25.
God knows. Yeah, we were babies. Well, you were a baby.
Yeah, literally 12.
And
Pre-COVID. The year before COVID.
So the play is a very complicated play to make sense of in a 21st century production if you're going to honour all the different colours in the tapestry. And when you said the East End in the 30s, and I thought, oh, Cable Street, Mosley, I thought there's a way of placing these people so that we can, you know, we're in love with Portia. She's beautiful, she's eloquent, she's got some of the best lines, but you then follow some of the other things she says in the trial scene when she just goes too far. That's much, much more interesting than all the saintly Portias I've seen. And it means I'm with you. I mean, there is Shakespeare, and that's the beginning and the end of everything. I have taken the liberty of doing a very radical cut and adaptation and working closely with Tracy. I've tried to make it shorter because I think that's going to be pleasing to the audience, and because we don't have the same delight in an extended conceit, and we sit in the dark for a period of time and nobody can leave. So unlike in the Globe or Shakespeare's Time or Now, 2 hours traffic is about enough, I think, for the stage. And I've tried to, we've tried to honour the complexity of the text, and to make it accessible by cutting out some of the wood so that you can see the trees. And occasionally I've changed a line, a word, but if I've changed a word, it's got an asterisk in the script, otherwise that would be sacrilege. And there'll be something like change a doit to a jot, because it sounds pretty similar and nobody knows what a doit is. And we've done 2 workshops on it.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what has been so exciting about this is once we open the world of Mosley, and I mean, Bridget and I have seeped ourselves in the world of Mosley. When I started this, I didn't realize that Oswald Mosley married Diana Mitford at Goebbels' house where Hitler was a witness. So Hitler was, advising Mosley the absolute playbook of winning the hearts and minds of the working classes by telling them about the outsider Jew, the monetary Jew, the untrustworthy Jew. I remember my Bubba telling me about these, the British Union of Fascists, saying, those Jews have got the better market stalls in Watling Street. If they've got the better market stalls, that means they've got the better housing. And if they've got the better housing, they're taking something away from you. So the Battle of Cable Street was about him trying to ignite all the other working class communities to show the Jew that they were not welcome in the East End. And this was the starting point for me on this. My daughter can tell you chapter and verse everything about the American civil rights, and it's absolutely true. All her contemporaries, they learn it from year 6 onwards, and it's brilliant that they should know that. But this history of the Battle of Cable Street, which was our own civil rights moment, has been completely forgotten, because the working class communities of the East End and the Dockers didn't allow Mosley to put a wedge between them. They stood with their fellow Jews. And they said, you shall not pass. And so I remember, the Irish working class neighbours down the road. There was a small Afro-Caribbean community, the Dockers, the unions. They all stood together. And
Jeremy Corbyn's mother.
Oh, Jeremy's mother did it single-handedly.
Never forget Jeremy Corbyn's mother.
Well, this is the other thing. Let's rip this story of Cable Street away from Jeremy's mother for a moment and put it back into what it was. It was a march against the Jew. And what we've discovered through the RSC allowing us to workshop down there and have been so supportive, and Watford Palace have absolutely helped us workshop it. This interface of our Portia being a slightly better educated Diana Mitford, and our Antonio being an absolute slight failure in life, but as many failures were attracted to Mosley because he showed them that their failing was because someone else was taking something away from them. It all just worked as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. So we're very excited for you to see it.
And the other thing about what is and isn't the play is the question you have to ask if you're artistic director of a theatre or a director initiating a production is, why are we doing this play now? Why are we doing this play now? It's had a long history. It's had a lot of outings. So why are we doing this play now? And we're doing this play now because of what's happening in this country now. We know that there are issues around hatred of the other across our country. We know that there's a threat to our right to assemble and to protest. And most shockingly to me, we know that there is blatant and overt anti-Semitism, and in a way that seems to have got more and more vicious and unpleasant in the last, I don't know, you'll know more than me, 10 years, and something that I literally thought was supposed to happen never again. And it felt important to us at Watford Palace Theatre, surrounded as we are by a large number of Jewish communities, to focus on celebrating Jewish culture, which we've done through many of the plays that we've commissioned and written and events that we've put on. And so when Tracy said that she wanted to do this, I thought, well, we've got to make this happen. It's taken years.
COVID, we had a wonderful talk. But I just want to say, actually, on the record, the arts is not it's not been a particularly, and I hate using the word safe space, but the arts has been quite conflicting for me as a Jew. They don't always understand anti-Semitism. They don't understand Jewish issues. And in recent years, I can't tell you the number of young actors that have said to me, when I go into a rehearsal room, I hide my Magen David. I don't want to get pinned to a wall asking me immediately what my affiliation with Israel is. I don't want to have to be put through a political purity test, which is the new form of anti-Semitism. And I found it very hard. I mean, although people behind the scenes have been very vocal and very supportive over the years that I stood up as an activist to anti-Semitism, within the arts itself, there was a lot of nervousness because people didn't understand it and they were scared, I think, to be on the wrong side of the argument. Bridget has been the most incredible ally on this. You have educated yourself, you have been passionate about it. And for somebody that didn't have skin in the game, that wasn't experiencing anti-Semitism on a daily basis, you have been amazing. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you very much. Speak, Hal.
Can I just say one little thing? I'm assuming that you've not got rid of the ring.
Oh, but the ring's in.
The ring is very important. On my little finger is a turquoise, a turquoise ring, which my wife bought me from Hatton Garden when my Shylock novel came out to commemorate that scene in The Merchant of Venice, which for me is the scene which once and for all dashes the idea it's an anti-Semitic play. When his daughter runs off, when Shylock's daughter runs off, she doesn't only take his money, she takes a ring. And he's told this by Tubal, isn't it? Somebody knows at the shul, yeah, who's kind of rubbing his nose in it. And when he hears that his ring has gone, he says, "Thou torturest me, Tubal. It was my turquoise. Leia,
I had it of late.
I had it of Leia," such a wonderful phrase. I had it of Leia, which makes it sound as though it's her flesh. It was of Leia. I had it of Leia when I was a bachelor. And at that moment, suddenly, he was a bachelor. This man was a bachelor once. He's a married man now. He's a widower. Where's the wife? He's bringing up a daughter on his own. A lot of the things that we think of, oh, he's a cruel father because he's a Jew. It's difficult to bring up a daughter. It'll be easier for you because you're Mrs. Shylock. But for Mr. Shylock, it will be particularly difficult because men don't know what to do with daughters that age. But also he says that wonderful thing, "I would not have given it for a wilderness of money." And that is the moment for me when I think Shakespeare intuitively knows what Judaism is about, a wilderness of the whole ethical construct of Judaism, which was to what Jews brought into the world was a civilized way of being. Against the classical world, against the animalistic naturist world. A wilderness of monkeys just echoes with desolation. I think Hazlitt says that the phrase has got something so wonderfully rabbinic about it, but it's also got everything biblical. This is us. What do we dread more than anything else? I'm not saying we wake up each morning and think, "Oh my God, out we go into a wilderness of monkeys again." But in a way we do. In a way we do. And the world that we fear most and hate most and have fought most against as Jews is the wilderness of monkeys, the absolute nothing, the monkey, the opposite to ethical, thoughtful, philosophical being. Shylock says it. At that moment, Shylock speaks out of his heart with pain. And once you feel a person's pain like that you can't actually feel racist about it. You can't be an anti-Semite at that moment. This is a man. This is a real man well, not in a sort of agony, in agony. And at the same time, he presents to you the philosophical history of the Jewish people. Tell me he's not a Jew
And
to
yet,
be proud.
at the same time, and in our play, don't worry, that it is in, and it was given to her by leave, when he was a bachelor. And it is very, yes, yeah, Leo. But, and then he goes straight into, after that, but my ducats have gone, my money is gone, she's taken everything from me.
It's the most worrying line in the play, "My ducats, my daughter."
Yep.
And it's so obvious and bad, I don't think he wrote it.
Who do you think wrote it?
Middleton.
Middleton wrote it, yeah, you're right.
I'm gonna
God, yes, it was
insert a
bloody
question
Middleton.
here. Just to get, we've heard a little bit about Merchant of Venice, 1936. It sounds really interesting. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about Shylock is my name, and maybe get you guys to talk a little bit about a comparison of your sort of vision of Shylock versus your vision of the Merchant of Venice. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about your novel and what went into this commission of this sort of re-envisioning of merchants and why you set it in contemporary
Well, just
Britain.
quickly, because I don't want to take away from what I think is the more important thing, because it's happening now and we've got you both here. But just when I started to write it, once I decided I could do this, I realized, how do I do Shylock? I'm very good. There aren't many better than me, but there is Shakespeare. And there comes the moment when every writer has to face the fact, here is somebody you're not fit to clean the boots of Shakespeare. So what do I do about Shylock? And it suddenly occurred to me, I needed two Shylocks. I needed a contemporary person who would be that was the first idea. I'll have a contemporary. I know what I'll do. I'll make it modern. I'll have a contemporary Shylock. You have a woman. I'll have a contemporary Jewish man from South Manchester, from the Golden Triangle, which is like that awful place they all go back to. What's it called? And then I thought, this is not enough. I actually need Shylock himself. And the pleasure for me of writing this was actually saying, I'm going to have Shylock. I'm just going to have it. And I'm not going to mess around wondering, how do I magic him? I will just have my modern Shylock meet him in a graveyard. They will, and he will meet him in a graveyard because they're both in mourning. The modern Shylock for his mother, as I remember, forget my own novel now, but Shylock himself, who is talking to Lear. I got this idea from reading about, it touched me a great deal, reading about, and he's written about it again recently, Maurice Saatchi, who, when his wife, the poet Josephine Hart, died, Maurice Saatchi would go to the graveyard and talk to her every day. And I kind of think that's what a marriage, the good marriages are talk. You talk and you talk and you talk and you talk, and to have the person you love taken from you is a cessation of talk. Almost above all, it's a cessation of talk. And I just decided that he wouldn't be able to bear it. So I wanted him to go to the graveyard and talk. And the minute I imagined him there, I couldn't get him out of my mind. I saw him, I heard him, I felt I could speak like him, I understood him. I didn't set him a political problem like this one. I didn't set him in the midst of, well, anything of the kind you've talked about. I wanted him philosophically to just be in a rage. My Shylock is furious. And he's furious about, as he is indeed in the play, but maybe I made him even more furious. He's furious about what people say about Jews, furious. He's furious about what Jews say about Jews. He feels there has been a massive wrong committed, and he sees it as his job to right that wrong. And at the end of the novel, I can't even remember how I did it now, but it was the thing that gave me most agony to write. He just tears the strip off Portia. Who the hell are you to make your fancy speeches about pity? Who the hell are you? Where did you get pity from? Where did you get the idea of pity from? You got it from the Jews. We taught you that. So don't take our argument and throw it. You don't even know what it means. And at the end of it, I thought, if I can leave Portia in shreds, that's the kind of humane writer I am. If I can leave a character in shreds, which is not what Shakespeare does, because he is truly humane, I would be happy. So that was the job I gave my Shylock. My Shylock is a contemporary living avenging angel.
He's also, I just have to say that the book is a series of spectacular flights of language. It's a complete joy to read. So
Is this me or Shakespeare?
This is you, darling. And it's fantastically pleasurable to map it against the play. And there's a kind of moral weight to it, but huge, huge entertainment value as well. But I have one question for you about the ending. So you have Beatrice, the Jessica character, who's eloped and she returns, and she somehow wants her connection with her father in spite of what he thinks, how controlling she has felt he has been up to this point. And she comes back and she's sitting by the bedside of the mother who is unable to speak now. And he comes in, and I was hoping for her to say something to him about what she had learnt and to forgive him. But you give her Malvolio's line, "I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you." And I was really surprised because what you wrote when she was away from him in Venice was very loving. And I thought she might be like a warrior Cordelia who comes back but isn't killed. So I was really shocked when Malvolio suddenly appeared.
And you sound disappointed. I'll rewrite it.
That's all right then. I've got my copy here. Perhaps you could just. Yeah.
I need a bit more time.
You see, you talk about the. I mean, I agree with you on many things. I'm taking a slightly contrary thing, but you talk about the humanity of Shakespeare, and yet Shakespeare leaves Shylock having been stripped of his beard, having been stripped of his money, having been stripped of his livelihood, having been stripped of his daughter, having been stripped of everything, and will be left homeless and unable to work. And at the end of this play, having been completely destroyed, he says, "I am content," and we never see or hear from him again.
Look, he doesn't get dropped in a vat of boiling oil like the Jew of Malta. You know, he is writing in his own time.
Well, I'm just saying, I think that's interesting that Shakespeare just left Shylock destroyed, and that there was no comeback. Look, the Jew of Malta is a cartoon. You know, it's the Tom and Jerry of sort of.
It's a bit
He's
dark.
also
It's a bit darker than Tom and Jerry.
he's also a very lively Jew. He's a very, very funny Jew.
Yeah.
Both these Jews run rings around non-Jews.
They do.
I mean, there might be one or two non-Jews in this audience, and I'm not wanting to imply that you're sitting among people who will run rings around you.
Bloody
they
definitely
will.
not Howard, just saying.
Because you don't.
But I have a very bad, there's nothing I can do, I've just got a very bad way of dealing with something problematic in a play. I think he got bored. I don't think Shakespeare has worked out the end of this play. I think he got bored. He must know I would be content. Maybe was it play year next year? He had to lock himself away. No. Elizabeth
I will be content. What do you think that was
go
the
out.
end?
You couldn't get paper or anything. Leave it. The fact that they all returned to Belmont. I mean, isn't that just the?
Oh, I know.
But that's what I mean. I mean, that's what I mean. Is he making? And so, you know, if you take political with a small p, is he saying? And these people have destroyed this person's life, this woman's life, this man's life, and then they're pouncing off to Belmont to talk about. Oh, I gave you a ring. He gave me a ring.
Oh, isn't it?
Are you gay?
And the fact that we've had turquoise.
Yes.
So the comparison of the way they talk about everything that they do is light.
These be
They're
the Christian husbands.
These be the Christian
husbands. He says that.
Anyway, you must come and see it because I think you'll have heard so much about it here. We think you should come and see it.
Yes, well,
I think it's an important. The other thing is because it's going up to Manchester as well, so do tell your friends in Manchester. It's going to Home Manchester, and then it's got a much longer life after that, which we are not allowed to announce yet. But it's very exciting that the life that it's going to have later on, both nationally and internationally. So I think it's going to be a very interesting, challenging, and
funny.
And very funny and short version of The Merchant of Venice, and its legacy that it will have, and the support, hopefully, that the community will give it, and beyond. It's got a massive education project. It's got a huge history project that I'm hoping will go into schools. It's going to remind people about British fascism. I did a series called Ridley Road that was about the 62 group. Some of you may have seen it. People were so shocked, non-Jewish friends and Jewish friends, saying, I had no idea that fascism was alive and kicking in 62. I had no idea who Colin Jordan was. Most people can't remember the Battle of Cable Street. So let's give them that as well to take away as a bit of legacy. And hopefully this will help teachers. We've reached out to a lot of schools. This will help teachers come in and find a way back into this play in a way to be able to teach it and understand it.
We've also got a digital platform where we've got lots of material about the play, about the history, about the production, but it's also slightly in the form of a video game. So it's targeted very much at young people, and we're working with Stand Up to do school workshops in schools through the run.
And that was, you sort of answered my question, but my kind of, we have one final question from me, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. But that was sort of my last question, is what are you kind of hoping to say to your audiences or to ask your audiences with this play, especially now within this context, as you were talking about before, of the kind of not the rise of anti-Semitism in the arts and in theater, but the kind of maybe drawing attention to maybe doing something about anti-Semitism in theater, and also, but perhaps the rise of anti-Semitism in this country and across the world.
So for me, it's about facing up to our own history as a country. And more generally, and also very specifically in relation to anti-Semitism, don't be a bystander.
That's also the legacy that Cable Street gives us. Because when you come in, I don't want to give too much away, spoiler alert, but when you come in, it's a very active, exciting production because it leaves you with a choice, which is don't be a bystander, like people at Cable Street who weren't bystanders. I'm hoping that the legacy will be, as I said, it'll be about reclaiming this play. It'll be about taking Shylock. Every single thing that Shylock says, I totally understand in the context of that woman, of being a survivor, of being tough and hard. And yet they want a monster. Those aristocratics want a monster in Shylock. And so they've created a monster. And I think it's so much of our history is societies that we've been in. They've forced us down certain paths where they've turned us into the very monster that they want to blame everything on in their societies. if that makes sense. That
makes perfect.
good, thank you. My son. So I'm just hoping that this play, as I say, will unlock it, having a woman say these words, and we're not frightened of our Shylock being unlikable. I've seen too many productions where the nobility of Shylock has come through and you end up pitying Shylock. You won't end up pitying our Shylock. Our Shylock hits it all the way along, but you will understand why she is like she is. And like we said, the legacy of putting that with the Battle of Cable Street, we hope will change, hopefully. In my dream would be to change the national curriculum so that it's taught alongside Holocaust studies and slavery and British, colonialism. Let's also look at Britain's constant flirtation over the decades with fascism that it comes back to again and again.
Important.
Well, on that note, why don't we turn it over to the audience, because I'm sure you guys probably have some questions. So if we could have the lights, thank you. And there is going to be a microphone on each side. If you could just put your hand up and wait till the microphone comes to you to ask a question. I think I'll kind of ask sort of a couple at a time. So I'll take one. I saw that lady's hand there in the middle first, if you could see in the second row. And then I'll take another one, and then we'll answer those, and then we'll go on to the next two. Yes. No. I think the microphone might not be
Hello?
on.
Oh, yes, we can hear you
there
now.
we go.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, it's not a question. I hope you don't mind. I just have something to share with you all. My son, who's now a banker, he won a music scholarship when he was 13, and he wanted to boys' school. One was Clifton College, which has a Jewish house. The other one was a very non-Jewish school. Didn't hardly have maybe one other Jewish boy. My son said to me, I do not want to go to be segregated. I want to go and mix. He was in University College School in London. He was very used to mix with all sorts of people. And I let him choose where he wanted to go. So he went to this school, which name I will not mention. And as soon as he was there, he started ringing us and saying, I really want to come home, because the boys here are calling each other when they don't want to give something. Don't be a mean Jew. I said to him, do you want me to go and speak to the headmaster, to the housemaster? He said, no, because I said, do they address it to you? He said, no, they don't even know I'm Jewish. I mean, the housemaster in the school did. But he said, they'll only beat me up. So we left it for a while. And then I went to see the housemaster after all and told him not to tell my son. And he said to me, well, I said, what? My son kind of said, what can you do? Can you shut their mouths? He said, no, but we can try and open their minds. But he didn't do anything. Talk about education. These are people who are giving him a full scholarship. And anyway, we left him then and said, try and, the staff thought he was amazing and treated him with great honor. Sorry.
Is there a question, Pastor?
Yeah, no, there's a story that
Yeah.
very,
We have a lot of people waiting to ask questions.
I just want to say that eventually we went to, he had a school play on Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice, and he called me and he said, the teacher asked who was the moneylender, and one of the boys shouted, the Yid. I said, what did the teacher say? Did he correct him that you don't use this? And he said, no. I went to the housemaster and gave him notice.
We get the point. So I think that
But
absolutely hits my message about this, which is these days teachers are very nervous about teaching The Merchant of Venice because they aren't able to teach it. They're very nervous about it, and they're very nervous. And so this will hopefully, the package that we're going to give schools is going to open a way to teach this play that shows them what is anti-Semitic. I mean, I think there's I've got some friends in the audience. We went to a thing recently where a priest was talking about doing Holocaust education and said, you know, it's very difficult doing Holocaust education. very, very difficult because they are such, you know, the very, very uncomfortable questions come up and we're not always sure, me and the teaching staff, how to answer them. Well, if that's how Holocaust education goes, you're going to need to have a lot better training for teachers on how to teach Holocaust, anti-Semitism, and Starting Point, The Merchant of Venice. Any questions?
There's a lady in the front row over here.
Oh, is it a question?
We'll have and just questions, please. We'll have a question and we'll take another question. There's a lady, if you could pass the mic to the lady in the white jumper, just in that row there.
But the lady's got it here.
Question, we'll take two. We'll take one question here and another question there.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much. Absolutely riveting. Been on the edge of my seat listening to you all. It's been fantastic. I've been part of a Shakespeare group now for a few years. I did 12th night at school and then forgot about it and have been relearning how wonderful, wonderful Shakespeare is. A brilliant, brilliant writer. One thing I've learned recently, come to mind, is that in The Merchant of Venice, in The Merchant of Venice, Shylock is never addressed by name. He's always known as the Jew. Portia, when it opens and says, "Tarry a little Jew," she doesn't say "Tarry a little Shylock." And I would like to know, I sit in between the two of you. I would like to think that The Merchant of Venice is not anti-Semitic, but with Tracy, it hurts me. It really hurts.
The legacy. I mean, I got the Arden version of it recently. We've been working so closely, and it's really interesting. I don't know whether it's the same in Othello, but it's not Shylock, it's the Jew. It's only the Jew. And I don't know whether in Othello it's the more.
And also...
But Shakespeare gives him the line, "Shylock is my name." Shakespeare writes that line. Shakespeare gives Shylock the power to correct the odiousness of what they're doing.
If you are, in your
Question?
teaching of
Sorry,
Shakespeare...
do you have a question?
Well, she answered.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there's a
question.
question over there in the white jumper.
And then in the middle is a gentleman.
And then there's a man.
Does Shylock have to be played by a Jew?
Well, you're getting onto the zeitgeisty conversation. Personally, I'm going to start this. I did a series called "It's a Sin," which is about AIDS in this country that went out. It was written by Russell T Davies, and absolutely everybody who was gay, homosexual, or lesbian in that production was played by somebody from the LGBTQI community. Russell 100% maintains that if you are playing a minority, you should be played by a person from that minority. And when I saw It's a Sin and was in it, I absolutely understood what he was saying because you get a shorthand. As an actor, I think everybody I should be able, you know, an actor, the job is you should be able to play anything and everything, otherwise just make documentaries. So yes, of course, Shylock and Fagin, and, you know, I was in a production of Fiddler on the Roof where Omid Jalili played Tevye. Does it change it? You know, we're going to be seeing a film coming out where Helen Mirren is playing Golda Meir. Is that right? Acting is about playing through your imagination and your skill and your training, anybody. However, and I do absolutely get what David Baddiel and many of us have been saying, when it comes to casting Jewish characters, people in our industry have to give it the same consideration, the same sensitivity, and the same debate as they would any other minority. And I think, as David says, being Jewish isn't just a coat that you shrug on and shrug through. You've got to have a connection. My friend Eddie Marzan plays many, many Jews. He's played many of my Jewish husbands and isn't Jewish, but he is absolutely steeped and wants to understand the Jewish community. So I would like to think that any actor that is going to play a Jew will feel some way and understand it.
Well, that's asking an actor to be a good actor. And there's a prior question: should Shylock have been written by a Jew? And therefore, should we ignore Shakespeare's play and wait for a Jew to come along? Well, I've done it.
Well,
You're still better off with Shakespeare.
But you and Arnold Wesker, because Arnold Wesker wrote The Merchant, didn't he?
He did.
Not as good as your book, though.
He did.
So I don't know. Do you know, it's a difficult one for me. I mean, they're bringing out a story about Brian Epstein, and his mother and father are both being played by very well-known non-Jewish actors. It's a really difficult one. I work in an industry where every single day the question is, who has the authority, who has the right, who has the appropriation. I've never heard it about Jewish characters and about Jewish writing and until now. And I just think it's important that we needed to have that conversation come into the industry.
Okay, next
What do you think?
question. Oh, sorry, go ahead if you, Bridget, would
I
like to
just
say
want
something.
somebody to give a mic to the man in the middle. I think it's, I think we're in a slightly dangerous moment in the arts. I think there have been a lot of voices unheard and a lot of experiences not given a platform, and that is something that at our theatre we do our best to counterbalance whenever we can, and it's always informed all my work. But fundamentally, an actor is an actor, and Shakespeare is a man, and he's written the best parts anyone ever wrote for women. So we have to not get Stalinist about this, but we have to be sensitive, we have to be aware who's in charge, who's giving the opportunities. Is there somebody available who is as good as the non-Jewish actor who's prepared to come to the theatre that you're doing it, you didn't play the part? I mean,
That's to give too much. Here we are, and we're talking about a woman playing a man.
yeah,
The end. If a woman can play Shylock, and I have no doubt that a woman can play Shylock, then a Gentile can play
I'm sorry
Shylock.
to disagree with you there, because I think this is about political context, and we live in a patriarchy, and therefore it's not the same.
Yeah, well, there's a question.
Yeah, the question is that the play was written in 1596, 1598. Jews weren't allowed back into England until the middle 1600s. Did Shakespeare actually ever meet a Jew?
Well,
Amelia.
Bassano, who many people believe to be the Dark Lady of the Sonnets, who is a highly educated woman, many people believe that she was Jewish. Some people believe that she wrote Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare wrote as writers do, with incredible truthfulness about things he knew nothing about. You know, he wrote about all the kings and queens. He wrote about women. So I don't know if Shakespeare ever met a Jew.
Well, he must have known what a Jew was because of as I said, you know, at the time there was a lot of Jew baiting, and also the whole. I mean, looking at
sorry.
There were
some.
The woman to speak to about all of this is a brilliant professor and brilliant writer, Rebecca Abrams, who has recently uncovered the Licoricia of Winchester, the female moneylender who ended up being one of the most powerful people, let alone women, in England from William the Conqueror kind of times onwards. But then the expulsion happened and off they went. But there were Jews back in England, and there had to have been Jews in England because of, as we said, Lopez, Queen Elizabeth's doctor.
And people who were forced to convert or appear to convert.
Shall we move on to the next question? There's a gentleman just over there on that side in a checkered shirt.
I'm very impressed with what you're trying to do and look really forward to seeing the play in Watford. Can I ask you another question? And that is that when you finished reinterpreting Shylock, are you going to look at Dickens and maybe do a female Fagin in Oliver?
Well, who knows? Who knows? We've got quite a journey to go on with this one, we hope.
Would I like to see you as Fagin?
No,
Yeah?
I'd like to see. No, would you like to reinvent Fagin?
I don't want anybody reinvented particularly. If someone you come along and you feel you two together see something that you feel you can do, do it. But I don't think that's because Shylock think Shylock needed to be reinvented. Dickens knew he'd made a mistake with Fagin. Within 5 minutes, his next books were full of lovely Jews. He hated what he'd done. He didn't get it. People wrote to him, people talked to him. He got it. Fagin is still there. I don't mind Fagin. Can we not take that?
Yeah, we can take that. I'll take that.
The problem is, of course, not what we can take. The problem is with all these things, always when you start to worry about representations of something like anti-Semitism, is the effect on readers who don't know how to distinguish. But that's a problem. If we worry about that, we would censor everything.
My main problem is how this play has been taught in schools or not. But, you know, when you have, who was the writer recently that said, take it out of the canon? his Dark Materials. Was it Pullman?
Is that Pullman?
Was it Philip
I don't
Pullman?
know, was it?
And Juliet Stevenson is saying, take it out of the canon. Don't do it anymore. Just take it out. And there is a really strong feeling when we were, talking to other theatres about doing this. People are very nervous of the
They are
Merchant of
very
Venice. They don't want to do it. And so I totally agree with you. They shouldn't be nervous, but it's got to be put on properly. And it's got to be, I've seen some terrible productions of The Merchant of Venice. I don't know whether it's worse to pity Shylock or to laugh at him. I've seen some absolute honkers. So, we need to come to it again and put it on and challenge it and do lots of interesting things, but at least teach it better in schools. That's my thing.
There's a lady with a microphone just there.
This is for Bridget. I hope you don't mind me asking you this. If I understood correctly, this was going to be your last production at Watford. May I ask, because you're a very impressive woman, are you able to say where you're going to go next?
I'm going to be doing various different things. This is going to occupy us for some time. I'm going to be working with the great voice coach and teacher Patsy Rodenberg, and she and I have been working together for a lot of years, so we'll be doing a lot of skills sharing and training in that sense. I've also got some theatre productions that I'm talking to other theatres about. Tracy and I have also got other irons in the fire. And I'm also thinking about ways in which I can continue to contribute to the sector in a strategic way, because I'm the longest serving the last artistic director standing. I'm the longest serving artistic director. So I've got a kind of a span of years about how things have been done and all the things that we've tried and failed to do. And this is a really challenging time for the theatre industry, as it is for everybody. But I will be available with effect from the 5th of April, so,
For bar mitzvahs, weddings, events.
Dickens.
Yeah, Dickens. But we have got some very exciting projects on our... There was a lady.
Just over there.
Wait, no, there's a...
Oh. Sorry, there's just behind you. Sorry.
Hi, hello. So I'm an English teacher who does teach The Merchant of Venice.
Brilliant.
In a non-Jewish school.
Oh, brilliant.
And so my question is that over the years that I've taught the play, the reaction to it has shifted, along with everything else I teach, to one of just outrage at the anti-Semitic language or racist language within the play. And I wondered if you had any advice on how to help the students navigate those reactions to come to a deeper understanding of the complexities of the character.
Oh, go on, Howard.
Can I just ask, what's the nature of their outrage? What are they saying?
They're outraged by trying to get to an understanding of Shakespeare's intentions and feeling there are some...
Are they outraged by the play?
They're outraged by the language in the play, and that kind of blinds them.
But what does that mean? The outrage as they perceive it to be Shakespeare's language, or are they outraged by what the characters in the play say?
Oh, that's
It's massively different.
I think they're outraged by the idea.
Are not Shakespeare.
I think they're outraged by the idea that Shakespeare has anti-Semitic intentions within the play,
but how difficult is it?
Shylock's at the end when Shylock isn't even allowed to practice his religion anymore. They struggle with that. They struggle with that ending.
So
just a minute.
No.
You're going to be a very, very impatient and bossy Shylock.
I'm going to be so... Go on. Say something.
I suddenly don't like this Shylock.
On with it.
It's not, there are problems at the end. Allow them to allow them to say, look, things are not resolved. This is problematic. There are things called problem plays in Shakespeare. We don't know what to do with it. But the anti-Semitic language that they hear is the language of the characters. It's dramatic. You can't read you can tell them that. You cannot read a play unless you understand the concept of dramatic language. That the language that's being used by characters is not the language of the playwright. The playwright is animating those characters. He is in charge of them. They are not saying what... that's the first... They are not saying what he... Get them by the throat. They are not saying what he believes. These are characters, you little... And then...
But because I identify with a 12-year-old, and I think that's why I identify with the 12-year-old, I get what you're saying. You're sort of reading a play, you're thinking, God, That's fucking awful.
That's the point.
But what is?
The play, they're reading the play, and they, you know,
But they're not. If they're reading the characters, if Antonio says something,
then you want
then
them-
you go, Antonio is awful.
No, but they're reading the play, and you're right. You want them to sort of go, what the fuck? You know, this is unbelievable. The Jew this and the Jew that and the money-lending Jew and the shrugging and the shaking and the, you know, all the legacy that we've got. I totally get... Bridget, go on, say something.
So you can't, you cannot, you must not tame literature. You must not tame art. The world is a worse place than Shakespeare described. Worse things were done to Jews. And people must not be afraid of the darkness. They have to speak it. They have to call it as it is. And theatre is the place where we play with this stuff. We explore
I
it.
understand what you're saying. Oh, I love it. A heated debate. It's like Friday night dinner. But what I understand what you're saying. What you're saying is, or Sunday lunch. What you're saying is, your students are sitting in the class. They're not watching it. You're studying it. You're learning it, and they're shocked and they're horrified. Absolutely get that. And thank God you are able to sort of hold that. Whereas a lot of teachers would turn around and go, "Oh, I can't teach this again. It's just too difficult. Let's go off for a coffee." So I just think that. But we are offering.
Yeah, exactly. Come to see
Come
our
and see
play.
what we're doing. We need to talk to you. We
will talk to your students.
We're doing a brilliant thing to contextualise the play. And I think I totally get what you're saying. As a theatrical experience, nobody should be coming in. But if you're a year 10, 9, 8, and you're 8, I mean, God, year 8, and you're reading it, it is shocking.
Yeah.
And it should be shocking. But it's how you then teach it.
But what are you talking about? What's shocking? What is it that you're saying?
Oh, come on, we're living in a
what?
world where year 9 can't even turn around and say the word, you know, oh, no, let's not say the woman without it turning into a major debate. You know, we're living in a world...
Fine, but we're talking about reading, the experience of reading a play. You have to, if people are saying it's shocking, you have to be clear. What is it that's shocking you?
You need
What
to have a
is-
support dog in most schools these days, Howard.
I
You
don't know
can't
what
say the
that
word
means. What is it that's shocking you? Is Antonio shocking you? Yes, he's meant to shock you, isn't it? He's meant to shock you.
What shocks them, you said?
No, there is nothing in the play to suggest that. But there's nothing in the play to suggest that.
Well,
He's a liar. He's a hypocrite.
When I was taught it at school,
But just because it's the title.
Oh, I love it.
The title character is not this. Timon of Athens. Timon of Athens. You believe everything Timon says?
But when I was at school, because I identify as a 12-year-old, we were taught, I mean, admittedly it wasn't the Jurassic age, but we were taught that Antonio was the hero and that Portia was the beautiful hair.
You were badly taught.
We were, that's my
That's
point.
right. So now let's help this lady. Let's help this lady
We're gonna
to
help
teach them well.
Howard in.
Practical criticism. You need to read the text closely and say what it says, and everybody.
Go on. This is
Come
enough
see
of
our
it.
play.
This is
Come
enough
see
of
our
it.
play.
Go on. I'm supporting you.
Just to clarify, I don't believe Antonio is a heroic character, and we do read every line of the play closely to unpick it, but there is an issue for the students with what Shakespeare's intentions are in calling his play The Merchant of Venice, in having Shylock disappear at the end of Act 4, having this horrific punishment imposed on him. The language grates with them because they find it hard to even read it out loud because of the world in which they're situated now and their sensitivity to language, which is critical of any minority. And therefore, there are problems in the play which I, as an adult, struggle to unpick in terms of what Shakespeare's intentions are and how to get students to a point where they can engage with those, accept that it is a problem play, and kind of and come to understanding of Shakespeare's complexity of intention in writing it.
I'm horrified. You're describing a new barbarism in which you're saying people can't bear to look at this language because we are so upset by the world that we're living in that people cannot deal with a work that deals with that upset,
But
that
she's
answers
dealing
that
with this
upset.
landscape
No,
at
I'm not
home.
attacking this lady. I'm simply saying that what you are describing is the most depressing thing I've ever heard.
And I'm trying to move beyond. I'm trying to move beyond their sensitivity to the language to engage with the play, but it is a blocking point.
It's a difficult. It is a difficult play. And actually, I don't even think it should be taught in year 9. I think you should be doing it for GCSE. I think it should be a set text for GCSE onwards. It's too difficult in year 9.
It is. There's a gentleman in the fourth row also.
You just had your hand up, sir. Can you put your hand up again?
Oh,
you could just
that's
pass the microphone. Just because we're streaming, if you could wait for the microphone, that would be great. Thank you.
I could hear
You could just pass it down.
trained as a-
It's so people online can
We're
also
streaming.
We're
Does this make
streaming
it
and
any better?
streaming. Yes, thank you.
I'm
Two
screaming
parts to
and they're
this.
streaming.
You know we're in this for the duration. Nobody's going home tonight. We're bashing this one through. Go on.
If you can't show the characters in Merchant of Venice, it's like saying we can't teach the Holocaust
I'm
because
sorry, is there
we
a
cannot
question?
show.
Is there a question?
Yes,
Okay.
Go on.
He's agreeing with me. There doesn't need to be a question.
absolutely.
He's just working
Only
out
to
what
help,
it is.
help in the mix, you couldn't say we mustn't show what the Nazis did because it's too disgusting for them to see. You cannot teach it unless you show what has happened.
I think the problem
But that's
is
exactly what does
my
happen.
question is, isn't it the case that before the Second World War, going back for the last 500 years, Shakespeare's play has never been shown in the way we now see it? And the audiences in the 16th century certainly didn't see it that way. It was Hiss the villain, wasn't it?
Well, there had been production with Henry Irving, wasn't it? Who was played it very noble.
Yeah.
There was.
And it was done
Did
a
the
lot at the Yiddish
audiences
theatre
cheer
in the East End.
or boo?
No, there was a real strength with Irving on, you know, the sense of nobility that they wanted to reinvent it. But can I just say something again? Sorry to bang on about education. The education that is going on about Holocaust education in schools at the moment is absolutely terrible because exactly what you said. My daughter and all her contemporaries, the word ghetto, concentration camp, experimentation and horrors was absolutely left out of it. The whole thing was just taught as a political movement, the Nazis who had a problem with Jews. So yeah, we have, seriously, education, Holocaust, you know, as my daughter and her friends have said, they'll bring out a Holocaust survivor, they'll listen to it. It's, unless you're Jewish, you won't really understand the context. So of course, we live in a generation of young people who don't really understand, our history of Jews in this country from the Middle Ages onwards, and they don't understand the legacy of where all that anti-Semitic tropes come from. They don't understand about the expulsion, and they don't understand about the Holocaust. So, of course, they're horrified at hearing the word Jew, because...
Well, they can't. What you're describing is a generation that can't read, and if they can't read, they can't understand anything. So you've presented us with a world in which young people don't... I'm not surprised, because I've thought this for a long time. This was always going to happen. Once you have an internet, once you have social media, that's... But I thought it was 20 years before civilization was over. You tell me it's over now. Anybody got a bottle of wine?
It's all right, we're fighting the good fight in Watford.
Well, good for you.
It'll
Good for Watford.
regenerate.
I think
Come
we
and see your play.
have room for one more question, and I think
Oh, no, we're in till 11 o'clock. Nobody's going in the morning.
one more.
Well, the doors are locked.
There's a lady over here on the second row. Second row. Third person in. Thank you.
I just think
But
I
it should
think
be on.
Shakespeare, all right, gets an unfair rap. I agree with Howard on that. But actually, I think the fundamental... would you agree?
Oh, good. Nicely done. Really
Well,
good.
Would you agree that the problem underlying the play is that it reflects Christian theology that sees the Tanakh, the Old Testament, as the religion of vengeance and the New Testament as the religion of mercy?
Absolutely. Absolutely it is. And in fact, we, in our first week of workshops, I said I wanted to have a conversation about the play with a rabbi. And so we went and had this really, and I said I had sort of imbibed this idea as a person brought up in a, I don't know, I suppose a lapsed Protestant family. I don't know if you bother to lapse if you're Protestant.
Not a massive rebellion.
My dad was an atheist anyway, whatever. I'd sort of somewhere in the ether, I'd got this idea that there was this Jewish god of vengeance, and that was what Shylock represented and what Shylock lived by. And then there was this, you know, lovely Portia-type Christian god of mercy and forgiveness. And so I think it absolutely is in the play. It's not going to be in our production. What's the word when you write about this in the book?
Rachmanis.
Yeah.
Pity.
Yeah.
Pity.
Yeah.
Rachmanis.
And that's very subliminal. I think the effect that has on people who aren't Jewish or don't know anything about Judaism, it's not the most sort of potentially evil thing you could take from the play, but it's very dangerous.
But that is 2,000 years of of that's 2,000 years since Christ. That's what the Gentile world has been saying about Jews. Nothing new about that. Is a standard across the Christian world. The Christians, it's the story too. It is. I mean, it is somewhere that's got to be dealt with because the Judaism that we get from the Old Testament is harsh. It's often unforgiving. It's to me, it's intellectually very, very grand, but it's harsh. And what you get with watered down Christianity is something that feels like, even though its origins are Jewish, feels like a very watered down version of the ethical life of Jews. But I think it is the case that for 2,000 years, the Gentile world has not been able to forgive the Jews for their ethical life. It's too strenuous. It's too strenuous for them. The Christians have not been able to forgive the Jews for Christianity either. So they don't know where they are. They're sorry that we gave them Jesus, and they're sorry that we didn't obey Jesus. That's the problem that the Jews have got. We are damned both ways. We're not lovers of Jesus, but Jesus was Jewish.
Yeah. Was there any questions from anyone at the back? Because I feel you've been quite marginalised back there. Oh, there's a man. There's
We'll take one more question.
Boom it out.
No, it's got to go on. It's got to go on the dreaded internet.
The microphone will be there in 2 seconds. This will be the last question because
obviously
we have to trap Howard here for a little longer to sign books. So this will be the last one.
Excuse me. Obviously, our appetites have been whetted for the production Merchant of Venice 1936.
Job done.
But I just wondered if the panel felt who was their most memorable Shylock and why.
It's coming.
What he said.
Schmoozer. Not a schmoozer.
Well, I can't answer that. What was your most memorable Shylock, other than the one that's coming? I did see. Oh.
I've only ever actually seen Al Pacino's film production. I've never seen at the Globe.
Okay, so we're going to stop you there. Great. So come and see.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for coming, and a big thank you to our panelists.
Well done. Well done, girls. Well done, ladies. Well done.
We're now going to have, you'll be able to buy Howard's books in the bar next door. He will be signing them. And please do buy tickets for Merchant of Venice 1936.